Chapter 7. Late that afternoon, when the sun inched toward the far horizon, sand melted beneath Mateo's feet. His transportation spell ended with a misstep that almost tripped him. He shook his head. His eagerness to check on Vittoria had almost broken his concentration. A dangerous misstep in that sort of magic. The briny scent of the ocean brought him back to the present. He stopped, pulled in a deep breath, and closed his eyes. The ocean sighed in response. The tension from sparring with Bernat at the quarry calmed, though it left traces of pain in its wake. Sore muscles, a tight back, a rolled ankle. They'd fought with wooden sticks to prepare Mateo for the upcoming test of courage, but the pain would all fade. Even with all there was to do for Vittoria, he couldn't forget the tests. 1,000 things assaulted his thoughts when he opened his eyes again, but he brushed those aside. Right now, his sole focus was Vittoria. She'd been at his house with Zuri all day. He'd check on her, they'd transport to make the betrothal announcement, and he'd bring her back home. After she was settled, he'd venture back out to the covens with Bernat and his men to listen to the talk among the workers. Rumors of Romeo's rigorous training schedule, the preparation of the battle arena, and a potential skirmish on the Central Network border would have to wait until morning. 5 days, he reminded himself. 5 days until the first test. With renewed focus, he strode toward a small, pale house hidden against the sandy beach on the distant outskirts of Necci proper, far enough from the city to avoid detection, close enough to keep track of what happened there. The exterior of the house was square and simple, and deceptive. The true house hid behind magical incantations he'd found in a grimoire near the southern edge of the Eastern Network. The book had been an abandoned old thing that had turned out to be worth its weight in gold. It held a plethora of spells related to disguises. From here, the building looked like an abandoned shed. A ridge of sand and rock hid it from passers-by. Magic made it easily defensible for now, assuming no one attacked from the sea. The wind blew at Mateo's back as he approached, urging him inside. The door opened ahead of him with a quick outpouring of magic. A sprawling, comfortable home awaited, decorated with floor-to-ceiling windows, cushions on the floor to sit on, and a wooden window sconce every few paces along the wall. Half-melted candles lay cold, waiting for night. Zuri, the woman he'd hired with the specific goal of preparing Vittoria for this new world, rushed up to him. Her hair was cropped short, just below her ears. Only a few months ago, her husband had died in a rebel riot. In the way of most workers, she'd shorn her precious hair to mourn him. Sadness lingered in her warm eyes, but her new employment seemed to have given her purpose again. "Majesty," she inclined her head, Zuri, I've told you, until Hode passes, you cannot give me his title. For now, I am simply the master of this house. Jonah is fine, but I'd prefer Mateo." Zuri propped a hand on her rounded hip and raised an eyebrow. "And I have told you that I don't care what you tell me. I shall call you Majesty. I have lived most of my life being told what to do, and now that I'm free, I'm doing whatever I want. Dare you to argue with me, Majesty? I'm a raging mad widow who not even La Cristiana would come near. You want to try?" She held out both hands in an invitation. He laughed. "You ween, of course. Say what you like." Zuri motioned to the back of the house with a tilt of her head. "That's better. Now your betrothed has locked herself in your room." Mateo frowned. "Locked?" "Well, she's asked to be left alone. Locked is a bit dramatic." "Why?" Zuri shrugged. "Great question. She was resistant to my fashion suggestions. Anticipating that might be the case, I offered only a few of them so she wasn't overwhelmed. They were mild, too. Hardly any skirts and no hooped sleeves. But she wouldn't be swayed. She's been asking for you." Mateo's concern deepened. "Thank you, Zuri. I'll speak with her." Zuri faded back toward the stone hearth on the opposite side of the room. Open windows welcomed in the rumble of the ocean as Mateo strode to the back of the house. He paused outside his room, ear canted. No sound came from within. With a quick rap of his knuckles, he called out, "Vittoria, it's Mateo." There was a soft shuffle, then the door opened. He slipped inside. The room was dimming with the sunset. The double doors that faced the ocean had been thrown open, admitting breezy air. Mateo turned to find Vittoria, half expecting to see her trembling in the corner or throwing something. Instead, she stood in the middle of the room with her shoulders back, hands at her sides, regarding him with a stoic expression. Was that a challenge in her gaze? He hoped so. He enjoyed it when she pushed back. Her hair, freshly washed and dried, shone in the light. The black strands lay on her shoulders in lazy curls. Her body looked as clean as a fresh bar of soap. Even her nails had been buffed and trimmed, no longer ragged and broken. Zuri had dressed her in a simple ivory shift, with sleeves to the elbows and a high neckline. The dress fell to the floor in only a few layers, if that. The layers shifted in the breeze. Such a dress wasn't high fashion. At least, he'd never seen a landowner's wife wear anything like it. The dresses of wealthy women were billowing and huge, kept that way by massive hoops. They took up an awkward amount of space around their arms and made the simplest tasks almost impossible. But Zuri had accomplished the most important things, at any rate. "Are you all right?" Vittoria nodded. Her voice was stiff when she said, "Fine." "Zuri is concerned." "She's kind, but she also... insistent?" "Yes." Mateo relaxed, hands at his sides. He smiled. "Insistent is certainly one word for her. She was raised to help landowner wives prepare for social events that come with their duties. She's quite confident in that world. I brought her here to ease your transition." "I am not a landowner's wife." "No, you're not." Vittoria gestured to the edge of a bed that hung from the ceiling with thick sea ropes. It was stuffed with a feather mattress and graced by several blankets. The bed swayed in the breeze, the wooden box that supported the mattress creaking. Several dresses fluttered off its edge, mostly silk, it seemed, but a few other fabrics he didn't recognize. All of them were bright and full, with numerous layers. Zuri would have gotten them as cast-offs from dressmakers. Dresses with tears or odd hems or inconsistent coloring. She must have repaired them, for they seemed perfect. "She presented those to me," she said, swallowing. Her chin lifted. "To try on, to pick one to wear to the betrothal announcement tonight. Said that first impressions are important. I have refused them." "All right." The simple scalloped neckline and high waist of Vittoria's gown made him think of, well, a clean worker. Simple, unadorned, no color, just straightforward. Anticlimactic, but oddly perfect. He felt like a fool for not seeing this before. Her tone increased in pitch. "And the charcoal, and the lip color, and the fake eyelashes. I refused those as well. She cannot change my face, Mateo. I won't do it. I won't do incantations that make my skin look flawless. It's a lie. I will not be a lie." "All right." Her hands spread down the length of her, and her jaw tightened. "I plan to be presented to the witches just like this when we announce the betrothal." Mateo nodded. "I think you're compassionate, perfect, and lovely." Vittoria's clenched fingers visibly relaxed. Her expression shifted to one of confusion. You're not upset?" "Why would I be?" "Zuri says I won't look like nobility. She's concerned the landowners may be offended, as if I'm insulting them by presenting myself as I am, a lavande maid." "You probably will offend them." She blinked. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "No matter what you do, Vittoria, they will be offended. If you wear their fashion, they will be offended. If you don't, they'll be offended. You can't please them no matter how hard you try. You may as well do what feels best to you. You and I are here for the workers and the landowners. Be yourself and let the rest go." Her entire body softened. "Oh," she swallowed. "Thank you. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be worried about here. This is all very overwhelming. Lovely." She glanced at the room with a wry look and a half-smile. "But overwhelming." Mateo closed the space between them and rested his hands on her shoulders. She tilted her head back to look at him. He studied her, his stomach smoldering like a hot coal. Vittoria didn't need any of the accoutrements that came with landowner life. She had a natural softness about her, inherent courage, he imagined. As he stared at her, he couldn't help his hope. By the givers, but they had an actual chance at this. "You are who I'm presenting, Vittoria, not a noble witch, not anyone else. You shall appear as you feel most comfortable. My trust in you is implicit. Whatever you decide, that is what we'll do, and gladly. What can I do for you that will give you courage for tonight?" She pulled in a deep breath as she wrenched herself back together. He admired her deeply for it. Seeming better, she said, "I feel as ready as I can be. I don't know what to expect." "Neither do I," he said with a soft smile. "I do have one thing I would ask you to wear tonight, if you will." He opened his palm and conjured a curling, creamy magnolia flower. Its rusty pink interior bled into the delicate leaves with a gentle blush. It sprawled across his hand, overtaking it in size. He held it out, gesturing to her shoulder. "If I may." She nodded once. He slipped a long pin out of the stem, his fingers delicately sliding under her neckline near her left shoulder, where he pinned the flower. Then he stepped back. She fingered the bloom awkwardly. "Is it too much?" "It's lovely, just as you are. All witches will see it." "Thank you, Mateo." Her fingers ran over the smooth texture of the petals. "I already feel better." "Good, because we must be on our way now. Bernard's men have been spreading word via my messengers into all of the nearby covens. Other cities and the most remote covens will hear the message later from Bernard's men." "Now?" Her expression paled. He nodded. "The time is now. Witches gather as we speak to hear an announcement from the very elusive Mateo." He offered her his arm with a quick smile. "Rumor has it that even La Salvatora will be in attendance." Vittoria stood next to Mateo with her shoulders pulled back, eyes trained on the horizon, in a show of supreme regalness. Tonight's goal was easy enough. Announce her, get her to safety. Yet so much could go wrong. They stood on the rooftop of the Eliza of the Giver La Principessa. It lay in the heart of Necci, on the interior edge of every coven. Every road in the city funneled right to the Eliza like spokes on a wheel. The holy building, erected over 2 decades ago by the hands of volunteer workers, was made of different types of stone. Most of the stones had been scraps from local quarries or rubble from fallen buildings that landowners had destroyed to make way for something new. The workers, so desperate for a haven, had even used quarry dust to create mortar to hold up their Eliza. "The faces of the workers," Mare had once said, fingers on her face, expression slack with memory. "They were always covered in dust, always gaunt, always desperate. The givers will avenge their sacrifice. Justice, no matter how long it takes, will come to our witches, Mateo. La Salvatora will see to it." Mateo jerked out of the thought, unwinding himself from Mare's voice and back to the present. Conjured magnolia flowers, the symbol of La Principessa, graced every archway of the Eliza, every floor, every doorway, every window. Their pungent aroma lingered in the air. Mare, years ago, had cast the incantation that kept the magnolia flowers perpetually alive. Powerful magic to live so long, but that was Mare. Hidden power in a landowner dress. The Eliza was little more than a facade of stone and hope, and the only place landowners never ventured. Not even Romeo, with his unusual attachment to the city of Necci. The Eliza of the Giver La Principessa was the only sanctuary workers sought, which made it the perfect place for Mateo to declare his choice of High Priestess. Hundreds of witches awaited, amassing near the front doors and boiling out onto the streets, stretching down alleyways. Every minute, more came. There were 4 entrances to the Eliza. Bernard's men blocked each entrance, 8 men in all. 4 visible, 4 hidden. They would admit no one while he and Vittoria stood on top. 2 more roamed the gathering crowd to listen to its murmurs. Bernard's men were once workers they rescued from the streets, trained by Bernard himself. They had sharp eyes and listening ears and undying loyalty. Bernard met Mateo's studious gaze and nodded once. "All clear so far." "So many witches. How will they all hear you?" "Magic." The wry expression on her face said, "Of course." "When?" His gaze flickered to the large clock on the tower outside the market. "In 2 minutes, on the hour." She pulled in another deep breath. Mateo reached for her hand, clasping her cold, trembling fingers in his own. She didn't pull away. An eternity seemed to pass while the number of workers swelled below. Mateo reviewed his speech in his head. He hadn't written it out. He kept ideas strung loosely together and trusted himself to know what to say in the moment. For now, he kept a wary eye out and listened to the lonely whine of wind in his ear. What better moment for Romeo to strike against him than this one? Of course, Romeo didn't officially know about Vittoria yet, although he had spies everywhere. Word of a gathering had surely reached the castle by now. Vittoria, seemingly oblivious to the danger, kept her chin high. Finally, when the hand had ticked to the hour, Mateo cast an incantation to expand his voice. He tried to slow his thumping heart with a deep breath. "Allo, my fellow witches. It is my pleasure to stand before you tonight as Mateo, son of Hode, your future high priest by right, fate, and honor." His voice traveled through Nechi in a gentle roll. It drifted down alleys to whisper to the most distant regions, the farms, the quarry, all the way to the heart of the covens just beyond bustling Nechi. A slight echo rang back. Such a use of magic would tire him before he ventured out as La Salvatore. By the end of the night, he'd be exhausted. But it was worth it, because such use built up his power and tolerance, and these workers needed to know. Cheers rose from the boiling mass below. "Mateo, Mateo." He lifted 2 hands and silence fell. The power of all those eyes felt heavy in the air. Vittoria didn't waver at his side, although her knees shook. Splashes of color interrupted the generally dismal sea of clothes as landowners and their wives left the shops and transported away from the unexpected crush of workers. Never in all his life had he seen such a sight of gathered witches. Neither had the landowners, which was precisely the point. "Yes," Mateo thought. "See their numbers. They are more powerful than you think." "I, Mateo, have accepted the challenge under the law of rights issued by my brother, Romeo. I have no fear, for I will win the throne and represent all witches, worker and landowner alike, well." He paused, allowing that to roll through the crowd in the covens. More cheers. The sound bolstered him. Vittoria grabbed his hand, her fingers so small in his. A few witches attempted to run into the Eliza. His guards stopped them. Vittoria's magnolia glowed on her chest, brightened by a spell. "But I cannot do it alone. Tonight, I seek your approval. If we are to forge change, a high priestess must be at my side. A high priestess of grace, equality, and honor. Without her, I am nothing to you." The low-level hum quieted. "For that reason, I present my betrothed, Vittoria Neria Antoinetta Guita, daughter of Neria Antoinetta Isabella Sal, and under San Guita of the Mayfair Coven." A ripple of astonishment spread through the city and swelled in a great crush of sound. Vittoria sucked in a sharp breath through her nose. Mateo gripped her fingers tighter. Up so high and unable to see their expressions, he couldn't tell if the workers were astonished or excited. He pressed forward, determined to believe the best. "You already know her, don't you? She is a lavanda maid. You have seen her generosity, seen how much she cares for workers. With Vittoria, I seek to restore equilibrium to a failing network structure, and all of its witches, workers and landowners. I care for all of you. You are all important. With Vittoria at my side, I know it is possible to bridge the gap and create equality for all." The suspense built as Mateo turned, gazing down every road, assessing every shadow, every sound in the cacophony. The last several months of work came down to this. Never mind that the moment he made this announcement, most of the landowners would gladly murder him and Vittoria. By making this declaration, he was stepping wholeheartedly onto a path that would most likely kill him before it ever saved anyone. "Workers, what do you say?" he called, thunder in his voice. "Will you accept Vittoria as your high priestess?"